Hello and welcome to another Stamp with Amy K live Facebook live video, and I'm starting actually a few minutes early, so hopefully got a few people out here live watching with me, and I'm just doing the double check to make sure that I'm in the right place at the right time, and it sure looks like I am, but just wanting to check that and get the comments up and running here. So, all right. So today, hey Patricia, thanks for hopping in today. So today we're going to make a little card with the Let It Ride stamp set. And I did this. There's a little bit of a technique on this one, which is going to be a little different. I'm not really a big techniques person, but this has got a real simple technique that anybody can do. So hopefully you'll find it fun and you'll like the card. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. I used the Let It Ride stamp set for this one, as well as the Golden Afternoon. Use that for the sentiment on here. Hopefully you can see that down there. And then on the inside of the card, because this is a sympathy card for someone who actually lost a horse over the weekend, I wanted to put a little sympathy note in there for it. And I used the Happy Tales, the So Sorry for Your Loss stamp set from there. So we're going to make the card just a little bit differently today. As far as the sentiment, I'm going to change up just a little bit on the card front, as well as I'm not going to include it on the inside of the card. But we'll go ahead and get rolling on that. So as you're jumping in, say hey, Laura Lynn, thanks for hopping on. So if you're jumping in, say hi, and just happy to see you guys. Happy to be out here today. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. First things first, the very first thing that I did with this for the background on here is I actually used the Pinewood Planks embossing folder, and I inked up the inside of it with a little bit of crumb cake ink. So when you're doing the embossing folders, and when you're using the embossing folders, it's got two sides on it, obviously. From, the one side, this side's got a little bit more, it's more solid on this side. I don't know how else to describe it, but this one is actually going to press everything up, where this one is actually going to make the indents, and it's a little bit, it's more lined on this side, and the effect that I wanted was the more lined look. So I used a little crumb cake ink, and I rubbed it across the embossing folder to get that look. So basically just taking crumb cake ink pad, open up your embossing folder, and then I just kind of slid it across and I didn't want it like coated and caked up with ink, but just tried to get a decent amount covering it. Get that closed and out of the way. And then took a piece of cardstock, and I see a little bit of goob here. A little bit of goob here. I'm going to wipe off the edge of my embossing folder so I don't end up with ink everywhere, because I probably will. Took a piece of crumb cake cardstock. It's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And again, all these measurements are going to be out on my blog tomorrow with the details about creating this card. So, as well as links to all the products if you're interested in purchasing anything. So don't need to worry about writing down measurements and things today. So I've got this piece of crumb cake cardstock. When I use ink on embossing folders, I lay the cardstock on the non-inked side to start with, and then close it over the cardstock, so that I don't make quite as much of a mess and don't end up with it smearing or shifting or anything like that in there. So that's how I do that. And then I'm going to pull the Big Shot in, and I know this is going to jiggle and wiggle in front of you guys. Have it set up with just the platform, because this is a dynamic embossing folder. So it's going to be just the platform with one of your cutting plates on the top of it. And you're going to run it through the Big Shot that way. A nice photo of my hand, apparently. Get the Big Shot up and out of the way here. And then the result that you get is that. So you basically get a little bit, it's like, it gives it a little bit more depth and texture when you use a little bit of ink on your embossing folders. So when you do this, make sure that you wash your embossing folder out, obviously, afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an inky mess. You can use a little a sponge or something like that, or just take it to the kitchen sink and run it under water, and that'll be good too. So, all right, so we've got our background done. When I do a larger background like this on a card, I usually cut it so that, I usually use the liquid glue so that when I'm adhering it, I've got a little bit more wiggle room on it, because when you use snail, it's kind of stuck down pretty well for good once you add it on there. So a little bit of liquid glue on the back of this makes it a little bit easier to move it around and make sure that I've got it in the right position. When I do this, I kind of just tapping it down and making sure that it's down along the edge as best that it can be, and then pressing it down. So there, we've got the background of our card ready to go. The next thing that I did is I went ahead and pre-cut a few pieces. This is the Floral Romance Specialty Designer Series paper, and I do have to admit, hey Phyllis, and hey Linda, thanks for hopping on. So glad you guys are here. So I do have to admit that while I like the vellum pieces in this cardstock, or in this Designer Series paper pack, this is actually my favorite design because it's got the wood texture on one side and the green on the other, and I love it. I don't know why, but that's just me. So I went ahead and used one of the stitched rectangles framelits dies, or rectangle stitch framelits dies, I apologize, and used that to cut out this piece of Designer Series paper. Just going to use a little bit of snail to get that adhered to the card front. And on the card, you'll notice that I did it at a little bit of an angle so that it's just kind of peeking out from behind the main image. So I'm going to try to do the same thing here and put it on at a little bit of an angle, hopefully not too much of an angle, and get that adhered down. So we're done with that part of it. Next up is the stamping. So this is a Pear Pizzazz panel of cardstock. And because I'm sort of stamping a little bit of a scene on here, not creating a scene, stamping a scene, I guess. So because I've got a little bit of a scene that I'm doing on here, I wanted some parameters where to stamp things, because sometimes if I'm on a big piece of paper, I don't always know where the edges are and what's going to be cut out and what's not. So I took the framelit ahead of time again and put little pencil marks on the edges so that I'd have an idea of where to stamp at so that it stays inside the lines and where I want it to be. So I used the horse image from the Let It Ride stamp set and a little bit of soft suede ink to put the first image on. So just going to ink that up well, do a little tap, tap, tap. All right. And I think it's about there. All right, that looks okay. And then the next color that I used was a little bit of Old Olive ink. And I used that for the tree image. So again, just doing a little inking and stamping. I stamped it so that it was part on and part off the panel here. And then I went ahead and stamped it again a second time without re-inking it so that it gives a little bit more of a, looking like those trees are further away type thing. That was my goal with it anyway. Hopefully it looks that way. So all done with that one. Now I'm going to take my framelit and I'm going to cut this out, and again going to pull out the big shot, and you're going to get to see a big wide view of my hand again. And this one I am using the magnetic platform, so I do have to swap out the plates on here, and I'll try not to bang into the camera 12 times doing this. So again, I lined it up sort of where I wanted it and had my pencil marks as my guideline. And again, with the rectangle stitched framelits dies, I am finding that they go through the big shot a lot better if you can angle them just slightly so that it's like it catches on it if you try to run them straight through, but it works really well and cuts really nicely if you run them through at an angle like that. There's not such a big clunk and such an issue with it not wanting to cut well. All right, let me get the big shot out of the way. And so there we've got our second piece. All right. The next thing that I did was used a little bit of the Old Olive linen thread and wrapped it around the panel a couple of times and tied a little bow. So I love that our linen thread is now coming on these little tubes instead of in the flat, so that we are able to easily unroll it and then it doesn't end up all kinked up and having to flatten all those out with your fingernail and that kind of thing. So that is a nice little benefit. I love the new Old Olive color too. So that's new in the Occasions catalog. So wrap it back around here, and I'm going to tie hopefully a bow that won't look like a disaster, but start by tying, let me get these a little closer together, tying a little bit of a knot, and that kind of anchors everything. It makes it easier for me to make the little loops on the bow. And I don't know why these are always so much easier for me to do. I can get them done speedy quick always when I'm not in the middle of a video, but I have to kind of fumble around, otherwise you wouldn't, I'm supposed to be a professional apparently. So, all right. So trimming the ends up just a little bit on that. So there we go. We've got the horse image done. And I'm going to adhere that on with a couple Stampin' Dimensionals. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully all right. So while I am sticking this down, I wanted to remind you about Celebration is going on now. So with every $50 in product that you purchase during Celebration, which runs through the end of March, you get to choose a free item from Stampin' Up. They do have a couple of items that are $100 with free with a $100 order. So those are some a little bit bigger, a little bit more expensive items, I guess, that you have as options for Celebration. So if you're putting in a little bigger order, there are some things that are a little bit bigger that you can get as your rewards. All right, so there we are. We've got most of the card front done. And again, I did go ahead and pre-cut and pre-stamp some things just so that I didn't have to bump the Big Shot back and forth in front of you 15 times. But I stamped this sentiment on this one from the Let It Ride stamp set. I just used soft suede ink and I stamped it on a little piece of that very same Floral Romance Specialty Designer Series paper. So I stamped it on there and cut it out with the tiniest little one of the framelits dies, the rectangle stitched framelits dies. So I used this little one here. So that one's the perfect size for sentiments, and just stuck it down with a little bit of snail. All right, and if you get crazy like I do with your driving of the snail and have it scoot off the edge, you can just take your finger and kind of roll it back down and it works perfectly. So again, when I stamped the sentiment, I guess I should have said that too. I stamped it a little bit off to the side because I wanted the horse image to kind of take the show on this one. So I wanted the horse to be overlapping the sentiment panel just a little bit. So I'm going to tuck that here underneath, hopefully get it fairly straight underneath. And then again, the rectangle dies are awesome, aren't they, Laura Lynn? Man, I'm using them on everything. So they're awesome. So I love them. All right, I stamped the horse image from the Let It Ride stamp set again and used one of the circle dies from the Stitched Framelits dies set that we have and cut that out. So again, did that ahead of time so you didn't have to watch it being bounced and banged around on the screen. And then used a couple of Stampin' Dimensionals actually. Oop, I got a partial one there. So when I was putting the Stampin' Dimensionals on, I realized that my twine was sort of in the way. So one little trick that I used to stick the bottom part down was to put the dimensional down here first where I knew I wanted it, and then add a couple here to the top. And this dimensional, the only thing that I've done is I just took a scissors and sliced it right down the middle, which I do that a lot of times with my dimensionals because I find that I often want long and narrow dimensionals and not necessarily these big square ones, or big, well, I guess, what is it, hexagon shaped ones. When I stick down things, it's a little easier sometimes if I can get them to be long and narrow rather than hexagon shaped. So adhere that down with the Stampin' Dimensionals. The last thing that I added on the card front was metallic pearls, which again, these are one of my favorite things. When they initially came out, I was like, they're okay. I wasn't too excited about them, but I'm finding that I use these on everything because they're just a nice little shiny accent. And I find them easier to pick up with the tweezers, but I know some people can get them with their fingernails, but I fumble around with them. So, oh yes, and Karen actually brought up a good thing with everything going on that she almost forgot about my lunchtime live. There is a big thing going on in the Stampin' Up! Demonstrator world today. We get to register for the onstage event. So we've got a group of our teams going to the different locations throughout the U.S. I'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I know Karen is going to be joining, and a bunch of people in her group are going to be joining up in Atlantic City, and there's a Salt Lake City event, and there's one in Minneapolis and San Antonio, and I can't remember where the ones are out on the West Coast, but I know there are a couple of them out there too. So that's one of the benefits of being a demonstrator is you get to sign up and go to Stampin' Up! Events. So we're excited about that. So anyway, but if you have questions about joining or interested in joining the team, I'd love to have you. So just holler if you have anything. Oh, Laura Lynn's going to San Antonio. Yay. That's going to, I actually have a couple team members who are thinking about going to that one. So hopefully everybody's getting registered where they want to go. So last thing that I did on the inside, and again on this one I stamped the sentiment in there, and I'm not going to do that in this card just because I want it to be a little more general card. But I did stamp the horse image from the Let It Ride stamp set in Crumb Cake ink. Thanks, Karen, I appreciate that. So, all right, so I inked up the horse image first. Oh, Looks like I missed his front legs. And then stamped it on scrap paper, and then just stamped it over the edge of the Whisper White cardstock panel. And whoop, well, he's a little crookedy, but that's okay. He's running really fast. We'll just say that. So, all right. So this is Whisper White cardstock cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4. And again, I'll have all the measurements and details out on my blog tomorrow. Just going to use a little snail to go ahead and adhere it down. Hopefully I get it fairly centered in here. All right. And we're going to fold it shut. And of course I forgot to grab my bone folder and do a quick little press with the bone folder on it, and the card is all done. So, and I think I made it in under 15 minutes, which is always my goal for these. So try to get them done quickly so that you guys can enjoy your lunch as well as get a little card making time in. So thanks so much for joining me today. Again, if you have any questions about the card, how I made anything, any questions about joining as a demonstrator, we'd love to have you. Right now, Stampin' Up! Is doing a promotion for new demonstrators who join during Celebration. You get $175 worth of Stampin' Up! Products of your choice, which is an awesome bonus, in your starter kit. And for $99, and it ships for free. And then there's a second option this year, which is something new, where you can also add in the Craft and Carry Tote, which is a nice little bag. And you can get that for $129, and it also ships for free. So nice bonus. If you have questions about joining, let me know, and I'm happy to answer anything for you. Thanks so much for joining me today, and hopefully you'll have a good rest of your Tuesday afternoon. I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.